The most common way to do file I/O in Perl is to use the object-oriented method using the IO file module. So let's take a look at how we do that in Perl. Go ahead and make a working copy of files.pl, and we'll call this one oofiles.pl. Object-oriented, and we'll open that. In order to use the IO file module, you have to first use the use statement to import the module into the Perl script, and then we can go down here and create our object. So this is an object-oriented interface. So that means that we have to create an instance of an object. Objects in Perl are held in reference variables. So we say my $fh equals, and then we call the object constructor from the module. And that looks like this, IO : file, and then the dereference operator and new. Inside the parentheses of the new function call, we put the name of the file, workingfile.txt, and the open mode, in this case a lowercase r for read-only mode. And then we can do the same or error. And in this case, because I don't want it to go off the end of the screen, I'm just going to put the error call on the next line. I like to leave the or hanging when I do this so that it reminds me as I'm looking at it later that I've got something on the next line that's still part of this statement. It kind of hangs there instead of the semicolon to remind me. And I'll put in here, cannot open file $bang. We can use exactly that same error message, and the $bang will expand to the operating system message. We'll see that in a moment because we're going to run this before we actually create this working file.txt. Of course, I don't need that anymore. I actually don't need the close anymore. We'll talk about that in a moment. And instead of this fh here, we're going to use the $fh. In Perl, an IO file object can be used exactly like a file handle, and that's why I name it $fh. Close is not necessary here because with the object-oriented interface, whenever this object variable goes out of scope, the object instance gets destroyed, which triggers the object's destructor method. In the destructor method for IO file, the file actually gets closed. So the upshot of all of that is that when the file handle variable, the object variable, goes out of scope, the file is automatically closed. So we don't have to do that manually. We don't have to remember to do that. If we forget to do it, obviously there's very little impact because it happens automatically. So this structure here works exactly like it does with a regular Perl file handle. So we'll go ahead and we'll save this and we'll run it, and we'll get our error message this first time there. There's the error message, and this is getting expanded from the special $bang variable, and that is the operating system error message. Let's go ahead and make a copy of this linesfile.txt, and we'll call this one workingfile.txt. And now that file exists, so if we run this again, we will get the output that we expect, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's from this workingfile.txt. So that's how you read a file using the IO file object-oriented method. It's actually a little bit more common to do it this way, and I'm going to show you this, using the object-oriented interface from the file handle rather than the default file handle operator here with the little angle brackets. That's a more common construct for the built-in file handles. When you're using the object-oriented method, it's more commonly done this other way, which I will show you right now. And that's using something like this, while my $line equals $file handle, and then the dereference operator to get at the object methods. And in this case, we're going to use the getLine method, and we'll go ahead and put this in a block, and we'll say print $line like that. So this is a much more common way to do this with the object-oriented method because you're using the methods of the object-oriented interface here rather than the default file handle. And this opens up all of the power of the methods inside of that object module. So I'll go ahead and save that and run it, and we'll see that it does exactly the same thing, and yet in the long run this is going to give us a lot more flexibility to do it this way. Now let's take a look at how you would copy a file. So you can see file writing as well as file reading. I'm just going to make a copy of this constructor line and make the changes I need for opening a file for write. So I'm going to give it a different variable name for the object variable. And the file name here will be newfile.txt. And instead of read method, we're going to use the write method. And then we will differentiate our error messages so we know which file is giving us an error should we get one. I'll just say here for write, and we'll say over here for read so that we know. Now we've opened a file for reading and we've opened another file for writing. Now when you open a file for writing, if the file doesn't exist, it gets created automatically. So that's good. And then down here, all we need to do is change this one line, and instead of saying print line like that, we're going to use the print method from the new file handle variable. So say nfh and the dereference operator, and then the print method. That's a method. It's a function inside of the object interface. And we'll put this $line in parentheses because that is not a built-in function call there. And that's really all there is to it. We're now copying a file. So we'll go ahead and we'll save this and we'll run it. And you see nothing comes in the output here because it's going to the file. So if I refresh over here in Eclipse's little file browser, we'll hit refresh there. We'll see there's the new file.txt, and it has all of the lines from the working file .txt. So that is how you use the IO file object-oriented interface. It's actually a lot easier to do and a lot easier to remember than the built-in file interface, and it's a lot more flexible. In the long run, you'll find that there's a lot more that you can do with it. I recommend that you take a look at the documentation for IO file. It's a little bit surprising when you bring it up here that there's not much in this particular documentation file at all. And the reason for that is explained right up here at the top. IO file inherits from IO handle and IO seekable. It extends these classes with methods that are specific to file handles. In other words, most of the documentation you're going to find in here, IO handle. So I'm going to press the copy command on my keyboard and paste up here so we can search for IO handle. And when we bring up the documentation for IO handle, this is actually where you'll find most of the methods that are available in the object-oriented interface in IO file. The reason for that is that there are many things that work like files, and the socket interface for connecting to remote systems, the standard IO interface, a lot of different things work exactly the same, and they all inherit this IO handle module. And so this is where you will get the methods that you'll use for manipulating files. So that is our IO file example, and you can see you create an IO file object with the new method. The object is kept in a standard scalar variable, and you specify the file name and the read or write mode just like that, and you can read line by line using getLine, and you can write to a file using the print method with the file handle.